I think that this is one of the things that I'm more excited about in Devconnect, and it's the Uniswap Cup. It's gonna be a football tournament, so it's gonna be really, really fun. I'm super excited. Nubank is planning to integrate stablecoins to do transactions with credit cards.
What I'm most excited by is actually Nubank. This is how we want to advance the state of crypto within the app, and then inspiring, hopefully dozens, if not hundreds, of other fintechs across the region.
In Colombia, basically the industry of gambling asked the government to close Polymarket. They say that they are operating illegally gamble markets. The only thing that Polymarket is doing, they do it on the blockchain in a non-custodial way. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Frontera, the podcast where we analyze what's happening in frontier markets, in frontier technologies. I'm Mav, co-founder and CEO of Bando. I'm with my great friend Kush. He's the founder of Odyssea Labs. And Kush, how's everything, man? Where are you right now? I think that you're traveling, right?
Yeah, right now I'm in Santiago de Chile, and we had a couple-week-long retreat with the team, and now just locked in here for some time and heading back home very soon. How about you? Looks like you're home, which I'm very jealous of.
Yeah, I've been home for a couple of months now, and I'm really happy
Nice.
because I'm not going to travel until Devconnect, and then for the holidays, for the Christmas holidays. And speaking of Devconnect, we want to start this episode with a couple of fun news. Dude, I think that this is one of the things that I'm more excited about in Devconnect, and it's the Uniswap Cup. The Uniswap Cup is going to be a football tournament where several different teams are going to play. For example, Uniswap Labs, the Uniswap Foundation, Arbitrum, Optimism, Sora, CK Sync, Ethereum Foundation, World Avalanche. And there are two really promising teams that, well, we plan to conquer the pitch, Odyssea and
I think it's
Espacio
gonna be
Crypto.
a good tournament, man. I'm very excited for this. Absolutely.
Dude, and the thing that I was joking about before recording is that what do you think of the match Odisea Espacio Crypto?
Honestly, I think it's going to be a really good match. I personally am not a big football player. Mainly, I played rugby for a super long time, and like my body's completely messed up, so I can like barely run. But I know the team is like super fired up. We've got a few empty slots as well, so recruiting a few people. So yeah, man, it's actually been really fun. It's been like choosing. We've had a lot of people be like, "Hey, we want to play," and now we're actually having people send like video submissions of their skills and so on. So I'm more of just like the team manager basically rather than on the pitch.
So you should be like this. There is this football player in Mexico called El Cheto Leaño, who was CEO, player, and owner of the team. He
Yeah.
was like a full stack player. I think, I don't know. So it's gonna be really, really fun. I'm super excited. I love football. I love that game. So I don't know. I'm genuinely going for the cup. I don't know. We're gonna train. We're gonna do whatever we need to do. Play fair and square. Play nice and win. I think that's my motto in football.
If I had to put my money on any two teams, it would be Espacio Crypto and Odisea. So
Dude,
I'm excited. Maybe we'll see you at the final. We'll definitely have some good content here to share with everyone.
I think that I hope someone spins up a Polymarket
Yes,
for the Uniswap Cup, and
absolutely.
I'll put some bucks behind my words. Dude, so let's start with news that have happened in the most recent weeks. And this week we want to start talking about Nubank. Nubank, there are a couple of really exciting things that are happening at Nubank in crypto right now. The first one is that Nubank just hired a new head of crypto. That is Michael Riani. And who's Michael? Just a little bit of context. Right now, he's the head of crypto at Nu. He was a product director at Coinbase for 1 year. And before that, he was product director focused on Bitcoin at Cash App. And he also worked at Tesla and Apple. This guy looks like a seasoned crypto executive. And I think that Nubank hiring him just expands publicly on their ambitions to basically expand their product offering around crypto. And the first announcement that Nubank launched after Michael joining the new organization is that Nubank is planning to integrate stablecoins to do transactions with credit cards. Nubank is this gigantic financial institution based out of Brazil, operating right now in Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia. Each time they publish their quarterly reports, everyone gets super hyped because they keep growing. They increase revenue per paying customer. They increase number of total users, number of total active users. So they are one of the most important financial institutions in Latin America, and their position doubling down in crypto. I think it's really exciting to see what's going to happen soon in for this company.
Yeah, I think like this is, we saw Robinhood really take very proactive steps towards launching a L2 and then generally just trying to come on chain. And I think it's always like what you observe in Latin America, right? You see like an industry leader do something in Europe or the US, usually the US, and then 6 to 12 months later, you end up seeing like a lot of similar, categorically speaking, products do a very close approximation to what these industry leaders end up doing abroad. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I think it just makes a lot of sense. Again, the entire thesis is like, actually, hey, look, this is cheaper, faster, and more efficient ways for you to move money around. What I'm most excited by is actually Nubank taking like a very clear cut approach to saying this is how we want to advance the state of crypto within the app, and then inspiring hopefully dozens, if not hundreds, of other fintechs across the region, right? And every like big fintech player who wasn't previously looking at crypto saying, what's going on here, right? So I'm curious how you think about like, yeah, what does this bring for other fintech players, and what do we need to do for more and more of these folks to come on chain?
Dude, take a look at the size of Nubank. To understand your question, for people that are not, I don't know, familiar with Nubank, the first thing is that they need to understand their size. So here I'm showing the Q2 2025 income statement from Nubank. And today they have 123 million users, customers. 60% of the population of Brazil uses Nubank. 13% of the population of Mexico, and 9% in Colombia. Average revenue per active customer, $12. That's huge. That's an enormous amount for a fintech. Revenues, today it's 3.6 billion, and they have a CAGR of 85%. Basically, they look like a fantastic startup, and they are a huge company. Gross profits, 1.5 billion. Net income, 637 million. So basically, they are bigger than Coinbase, bigger than Robinhood. That's the size, that's the relevance of this company. And what does this imply for other competitors? I think that it gives a message that everybody needs to have a stablecoin strategy. At Bitso Stablecoin Conference, I said this, that in 2021, basically all boards of any software company were saying, what's your AI strategy? I think that today, the board of any fintech or bank is asking, what's your stablecoin strategy? So there's a big opportunity for different companies to try to solve the problem of helping big fintechs and big banks integrate stablecoins. And we should be thinking out of crypto. It's not implementing crypto, it's implementing stablecoins, right? And this difference is really, really important because obviously crypto or stablecoins are a subset of crypto, but that's the way to penetrate the market of these huge fintechs. So that's how I see it. Everybody should be thinking of this type of strategies.
I think that like stablecoin integrations are one first kind of shallow approach for me, right? When it comes to like the adoption of crypto, because then like, oh, stable coins, and by the way, you can like deposit your stable coin, and we've talked about this before, right? It's like you can deposit your stable coin into Aave, or you can take a loan out against some other asset that you perhaps bring onto the fintech platform. But then, we start talking about decentralized identities and your zero knowledge cryptography. So I think like stablecoins are, I wouldn't even, necessarily label it a Trojan horse, because I think people to some extent are quite aware of the underlying technology, at least on like, product wise. But I think that's what I'm excited by, is like, yes, stablecoins are like that first step, but what comes afterwards, and helping these teams sort of transition massively towards the adoption of that tech, I think is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, and along those lines, I think it's important to see how different fintechs in frontier markets are moving and integrating these technologies. And this set of news clearly explains that. So Clara and Bitso are having a partnership to push stablecoin payments in business accounts. So Bitso Business and Clara. What's Clara? Basically, it's a B2B neobank that they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars to deploy this product in Latin America. But basically, they have traditional rails. They were not focused on stablecoins, and this week they announced a partnership with Bitso Business to launch stablecoin cards. So my read here is that they're feeling steps, or they're hearing steps in the roof. So they need to start thinking on how to move faster, because I know that these companies are struggling to develop product market fit, because yeah, they can have I don't know, a better UI, but at the end, if they have the money velocity of a bank, UI is not gonna win. It's not the only thing. Obviously, it's super important, that can help them acquire a bunch of users, but they need to deploy different stablecoin rails. And it's really interesting to see that instead of they doing something with a partnership with Bridge or Rain or something like that, they go through Bitso. And
Yeah.
my guess is that that's because of regulatory clarity, basically. So in the upcoming months, with more regulatory clarity, we're gonna see a lot of new startups trying to compete in these segments, I think.
Yeah, I always think, a few episodes ago we talked about Binance, and how, as they were looking to roll things out in Mexico, like, because they have one of the few licenses to actually do things properly with crypto, right? It's like, oh, it's always these partnerships with like the folks who have that, and I think it's to some extent just, I would say, challenging, in the sense that it essentially implies that we have these bottlenecks in like adoption. Obviously, Bitso is going to be the one that's going to drive a lot of that in the region, but yeah, excited to see Clara like pivot as well. I think just like everybody, like there will be no successful fintech apps will, as you say, basically not have a crypto or slash stablecoin strategy. I think it's just going to be like a prerequisite. It's like, oh, you don't use stablecoins? Well, then why would we take a bet on you, right? Or why would this be maximally successful? So, yeah, super exciting. And also, I think the B2B like angle will be huge too, right? Excited to see where that unfolds.
Definitely, I think that's a huge market, basically in every region and in frontier markets. As there are a lot of imports, exports, it makes a lot of sense. And take a look at this. Also, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened to CIBanco. It was a broker, a stock broker, and it went under. And basically, they are going to a process to liquidate the assets. And that's relevant for us because rumors started to spread that Bitso wanted to buy this broker. And it's really interesting because take a look at this. They have 7,000 accounts and assets under management of 500 million pesos. Those are not a lot of accounts and not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. My guess is that Bitso wanted to buy CIBanco because of their licenses.
See.
Because 7,000 users and that amount of assets under management is like how valuable this company could be.
Yeah, I think it's just like acquisition. It's the typical M&A strategy to unlock kind of that regulatory angle. We saw Coinbase do something similar with Deribit, to start operating derivative exchanges. And I think basically a very similar strategy. But again, it's like Bitso, boom, again in Mexico, right? It's Tio Bitso, making moves.
Yeah, and just to give the numbers in a unit of account that anyone can understand, this broker has $27 million in assets under management. I think that there are certainly users, single users, people in Coinbase that have more money than that. One user.
Yeah.
So it's not a big company, but they have the regulatory licenses needed to operate. So it's really interesting to see that Bitso did a bid, or rumors started to spread about this. I really don't think that this is gonna happen. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, interesting to see just that news. And it's interesting because the narrative in Mexico starts to include Bitso as a huge company, like a shaker and mover in the industry. In crypto, we obviously know that, but I think that Bitso is starting to penetrate abroad the crypto landscape in Latin America, and that's really exciting. And moving along to other news in Colombia, this is something that I think it will happen in different places of the world. In Colombia, basically the industry of gambling asked the government to close Polymarket. So what they are requesting is that the government should block Polymarket because it's they say that they are operating illegally gamble markets. So I think that it's a really interesting thing because the only thing that Polymarket is doing, the only difference is that they do it on the blockchain in a non-custodial way. So I think that that brings a lot of speed for shipping code and shipping products. And obviously, the industry of gambling in Colombia, I bet their tech is super crappy, right? And maybe they don't have the ability to pay users really fast. And so they can't compete on product, and they don't have the liquidity that Polymarket has. So this is a really interesting news because I think that it's going to be a trend that expands across the world. What do you think about this?
I think like what's most interesting is the interfering in election outcomes, and that being, yeah, they might say that there's sort of like illegal operations of security, whatever. But I think probably what they're more threatened by is how Polymarket is shifting like the public perception, because oftentimes polls and so forth don't necessarily reflect like the true outcomes of certain elections, whereas Polymarket in theory gives you like skin in the game, market driven outcomes of what certain decisions will be made, and obviously particularly relevant at the electoral and political level. And so I would say if I had to guess on like, is it because of the gambling component or is it because of the quote unquote electoral interference? I would put it rather on the latter and say that it's actually because of that. And again, this is why I'm so excited for like this technology in the region, because oftentimes a lot of polls and misinformation ends up causing a lot of disharmony in society, right? So that's like kind of my bull bet on Polymarket and these types of prediction markets.
Yeah, so they are asking, or they are saying that electoral bets are not legal, and that also paying with crypto like Bitcoin is not a legal tender to pay or to do, basically to bet, to do any gambling. So that's really interesting because I think that Polymarket can work around those two specific requests. Maybe they say, okay, if you don't want any electoral prediction markets in Colombia, we'll block them there. I'm certain that they can do that. And also something like, okay, if you don't want, I don't know, betting on Bitcoin or whatever, that basically in Polymarket you do it in USDC. So I think that it's also misinformation from the gambling industry in Colombia. And it's really interesting to see how that's going to unfold because think about it. With Polymarket APIs, you could deploy a big competitor for this industry really fast. And that's an interesting product approach. And I think that'll eventually happen. A Colombian entrepreneur will say, why should I create my market for football if I can use Polymarket? And
Right.
it's gonna be really interesting to see those type of solutions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dude, please Fill me in with what happened in Nepal.
Yes. All right. So, this for me is one of the most interesting like pieces of news that we've perhaps covered in Frontera, and the premise is the following. So Nepal began banning a lot of social media platforms a few months ago, and a lot of the youth basically went out into the streets and started protesting against these social media bans. Basically, Nepal, very similar to a lot of other Latin American emerging markets, has suffered a lot from corruption, and I think a lot of the people were just like absolutely tired, sick and tired. There's also massive inequality in Nepal and so forth. And so what ended up happening is a lot of people started protesting and so on, going out into the streets. And then they completely shut down a lot of communications. People were able to bypass this with VPNs and private messaging apps like that still enabled people to get together. And one of those particular sort of applications was Discord. And after basically like dozens of people were killed in the end, dozens of youth were ended up being murdered. The Nepali youth, it was tens of thousands. I think it was about 100,000 people in a Discord server, ended up electing somebody within a Discord poll on who should be the next prime minister, right, of Nepal. And for me, this is like why this is particularly relevant is because we've essentially created this like internet native coordination layer that sits above the nation state, right? And it really transcends like the power of the nation state because given, and we talk a lot about this, right? Like a lot of technology, like this is a particularly sort of like defensive technology. Like you can't shut down distributed systems, right? And so the Nepalese people were able to get together and rally around electing somebody via Discord server. It was an interim sort of prime minister. Now they're going through a much more formal electoral process. But even like they were, shutting down sort of people's access to financial services, and people started using Tether, for example, as a way to transmit value. And again, it just shows kind of two things. One, certain governments are going to use more and more power to try to shut down. And I always think, emerging markets are sort of canaries in a coal mine, right? Little glimpses into the future. And I fundamentally just believe that what we're seeing is we're essentially seeing this new layer of coordination that, again, sits above the nation state. But yeah, I'm curious, like, when you read this news, I know you haven't looked too much into this, but like what thoughts this sparks for you? Why does this matter for us as well? And kind of the work that we're trying to push forward.
I really like what you said that frontier markets are like canaries in a coal mine because you start seeing this type of things in different markets. And if the same type of environment hits a developed market, the probability of something like this exploding, it's really high because basically now we have the same tools. Maybe, I don't know, 100 years ago, people thought like, I don't know, a country in Latin America or in Asia, they are underdeveloped. So their type of revolutions will be completely different if a revolution happened in a developed market. But today, how different could it be if we have basically the same amount of technology and the same type of technology? When you think of first principles, what's the difference between this event in Nepal and the events in the capital when Biden was starting his process in the US? It's basically, if you remove all cultural biases, it's a really similar thing. The only difference was that instead of Discord, in the US they use Twitter, and that obviously with the political andamiage that there is in, or the political scaffolding that there is in the United States, they were able to, I don't know, ban Trump at that moment and do a lot of things. In Discord and in Nepal, they couldn't do it. And the final point was that they elected a new prime minister, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's just crazy to see this like transition from, corrupt politicians and corrupt governments through to this interim prime minister being elected on Discord to now going through like a formal governance process to actually elect somebody. And also the power of Tether and, distributed like money movements, right? That, you can't shut down people's accounts with crypto. And I think that that's a really powerful idea too, right?
Yeah, definitely. And because also right now we have the power of internet and the power of money, right? So the power of having sovereign money and sovereign information, And it's really interesting to see how you can access each one of these and how you need VPNs, because those are like single points of failure eventually. And one thing that I see is that this type of coordination, it'll continue to happen. And the problem, a big problem of this type of coordination, I think, is that how do we know which side is a good one, right? Because maybe a really small fanatic group in a developed market could start something like a mini revolution in Discord, and it catches fire, and then we're in a horrible situation, right? So yeah, I don't
Especially
know. This
now
is
with like, I don't know if you saw, but like Sora 2, right?
yeah,
And like Sora is basically OpenAI is building like misinformation TikTok, right? Where you can publish like, you know, you can essentially publish these videos that you create, and obviously people, because it's coming from the Sora, application, like everybody will know it's made by AI, but still, like the moment it sort of jumps out of that, and again, it just for me reinstantiates the need for distributed systems and cryptography and so forth too. So, yeah, expect to see a lot more of this happening, basically.
I'll do a quick recommendation. Have you seen this movie, Mountainhead?
I have not.
Dude,
This
check it
looks
out.
interesting.
Check it out. Is a group of four billionaires that they were friends, and they go to a mountain to have like a retreat. And basically, it's a comedy and a drama, but it talks about this type of things. It literally talks about Sora and like AI misinformation. Obviously, they don't mention Sora, but it's really fun because you can see in the characters personalities like Elon Musk, like Peter Thiel, like Sam Altman. So I don't know. It's a good movie, and also Steve Carell is the goat. So
I love it.
great, great movie. Dude, just to finish, with all the trend that's happening in DATs in the world, we reported that there was a Brazilian DAT, then a Mexican DAT for Bitcoin. And this week, it was reported that a new DAT is coming. That is a digital asset treasury. So basically, companies that buy a digital asset, and as they have a public stock, they can the net asset value of what they have in the fund should be converted into the stock in the price and the market cap of the stock. So this week, Orange BTC, it's gonna be listed in B3, that it's the Brazilian stock exchange, and they have backers like the Winklevoss twins, Adam Back, Ricardo Salinas, that it's one of Mexico's billionaires. And it's reported that this is gonna be like in the ranking of DATs. It's gonna be in between the position 27, between 28 and 23, of how big of a DAT it is. And it's just interesting to see this type of instruments being listed in the Brazilian stock exchange. Now Brazil is going to have two DATs, and basically it's going to be the only country with the only frontier market that I know that has a data digital as a treasury. What
Yeah,
does
this
this tell
is,
you about Brazil?
man, I mean, like what we've always said, right? Like regulatory infrastructure that enables DATs and mature financial markets. Also interesting that Ricardo Salinas is in on this, along the Winklevoss too, right? I've been hearing like a lot of bearish takes recently on DATs though. So, it's like, are we going to leave like emerging markets holding, Bitcoin DAT bags? Is, I guess, one of my concerns here.
Have you seen? I don't know if we've talked about this, but have you seen those animations of black holes merging? Have we talked about
Yes.
this?
We haven't talked about it, but I've definitely seen the image. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, those are dots. So a big black hole are dots, and then like on-chain markets are the other black holes. And I mean black hole not in a bad sense, but just for the sake of the animation, that basically they start oscillating, and eventually they collide, and they create a huge black hole. That's my thesis. That's gonna
Yeah.
happen, because basically the thing is that Today you cannot have Bitcoin on a, well, you can have an ETF, but it's not a stock. So like it's a really
Yeah,
a minuscule difference, but it's a difference. So they'll start colliding until they are the same thing, I think.
totally, totally. Awesome. Really great podcast, man. Loved it. And yeah, looking forward to cooking a little bit more with you.
Amazing, man. Yeah, me too. And also looking forward to see you on the pitch in the Uniswap
Very
Cup.
soon. Exactly. Can't wait.
Amazing,
Awesome.
man. Well, follow Kush at 0x Kush. Follow me at Abraham CR. Subscribe to the newsletter. We produce the best research about frontier markets. And see you next time. Thank you, man. Take care.
Peace. Ciao.